Welcome, my fully armed friends. Hope everybody's doing well. Today, Miss Judy and I find ourselves in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've got a baseball buddy that has introduced me to Grady Little, and Grady lives up in this neck of the woods, and I got the opportunity to sit down today with he and his wife, Debi, and man, what amazing people. Such a blessing to sit with them. For you baseball fans out there, if Grady's name sounds familiar, it's because he was the manager of the Red Sox back in the early 2000s and ended up managing the Dodgers as well in Los Angeles. And in my opinion, just from a fan's perspective, basically built the championship team that the Red Sox ended up being in the early 2000s. He's a character himself. And it was just a blessing to hang out with him today. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, click the like button, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Let's get the word out. So this is Grady and Debi Little on Fully On.
Welcome to the Fully On Podcast with Chris Hennessee. You got your armor on?
All right, guys, welcome back to Fully Armed. I'm in here today I'm just going to start with Debi because Debi Little, it's so good to have you. Oh, Grady's in here too. Grady and Debi Little, thank you so much for coming into the armored car with me and opening up your house too. And thanks for the coffee too, by the way.
You're welcome.
Beautiful day here just outside of Charlotte. You guys live here. You've been here for 4 years. Is that what you said, give or take?
In this house,
In this
we've
house.
been here about 14 years now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Just a little background right off the bat. So, are you both Carolinians, or did you grow up?
Well, Debi grew up in Pinehurst, North Carolina.
Okay.
And I came here when I was going into high school, and we eventually met, and we started our family right here.
Yeah. Well, that's in this neck of the woods then.
Yes, that's
All
right.
Good deal. And I asked you earlier, but you guys have been married for a little while, haven't
A
you?
little while.
Yeah. What'd you say?
53. Yeah.
53
Yeah.
years. How about that?
It is.
Man, that's amazing. It really is. That's great. It's a blessing to hear that. So where did you guys meet? How did you guys meet up?
How long is this show? You
Oh,
don't have enough time for this.
Yeah.
Nancy.
Do the short version.
No. Here's the great thing about it is this is a podcast and a YouTube thing, so we
Yeah.
can go on for hours.
Yeah.
I don't care. However long you want to take. So go for it.
Like I said, like I told many people, my father was transferred here when I was going into high school. Okay. I went through high school, then I signed to play professional baseball, what little I could play.
Yeah.
And so one winter, I came home from a baseball season, and I'm sitting around the house. I'm still a single man, and I was at their house. And my dad came in one day and said, "Man, you need to go up there to that drugstore and see this blonde up there." So I did. I went up there and made some of that nickel dime conversation, and then eventually went out on a couple of dates with Debi. Then my mom and dad were having a barbecue in the backyard. It's the first time he had seen us together.
Yeah.
And he pulled me to the side and he said, "That's not the one I saw." So
How about that?
53 years later, here we sit.
Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, that's just a really great mistake to have happen right there. So.
Well, that means somebody much powerful than us was working on that.
Yeah. We could see divine intervention in that for us. The funny part was I wasn't even supposed to be at that location. We had 2 stores here in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And he went to the manager asked me to go over one night, and that's the night he came in.
How about that?
Yeah. So it never worked there again.
Wow. So that was, and you guys, that was over 50 years ago then.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So were you in baseball at the time?
Yes, I had just come home. I had just been playing a couple
Oh,
of
you
years
said that,
during
yeah.
the summer, and,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I came home for the off season, and
Yeah.
that's where we were.
How about that, man? So going into it, you were well aware. The reason I say it like this is because my wife knew what I was doing for a living
Yeah,
when we met. I don't know if she fully understood what that meant as time would go forward with
Right.
this, touring, traveling musician. You knew what this guy did for a living, right?
I did and I didn't.
Yeah.
I really didn't understand the depth of the moving and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew he would be transferred somewhere, like he would be in West Haven, Connecticut or someplace. He was with the Yankee organization at that time.
Yeah.
So, but I learned very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
And so if that was the case, then you guys had a son within the first 5 years of
Yes.
right?
Yes,
what I was
we
thinking,
did.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you got a kid. Now you get to go take off and chase baseball all over the country, right?
That's pretty much the way it worked.
Yeah.
It came to a point when he got to be about 12 or 13 years old. Our off seasons were still being spent here in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So we decided it was time for him to stay in one place and go to school
Right. I get
in
that.
one place through the junior high school and high school. And
Yeah.
and so that's when we locked in here in Charlotte.
Yeah. And because that's tough. I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of bouncing around. And I know for my kids and for me too, when I was growing up, I feel like I wasn't the type that could have really jumped around from school to school or whatever. And so I think that's a big move, right? That's probably got to put a lot of thought into that, right?
Well, we kind of did what we had to do
Yeah.
for survival, and we knew we wanted to be together still, so we just made it happen. But there were a couple of years there when he was 6. No, he was a little older than that, 6 or 7, 8 years old, and he'd go to 2 or 3 different schools a year, one for the fall instructional league and one for during the season and one during spring training. He was jumping around, but then when he got locked in here, he's been locked in ever since.
Yeah. How about that? And you guys have 3 grandkids now, right?
Right.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I thought you said.
We have one son and he's got 3.
How about that? Well, that's fun. So you guys are close to grandkids, unless they're out running all over the country too, right? So, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. One grandson is in Florida. He's 25 and he's running a marina down there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The middle grandson is going to college here at UNC Charlotte.
Yeah.
And then the 16-year-old, like you were talking about your kids having a little different interest. Well, that's how they are. You know, the youngest is going to be in a play in a week from
Oh,
now,
wow,
you
okay,
know.
yeah.
But he could be golfing or anything else next week.
Yeah.
But they do all have their special interests. And that's just it. You treat them as the individuals.
Yeah. So did you guys get involved in a like a local church back then, or was it kind of bouncing around, or?
The reality is he's working on Sunday.
Well, see,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hesitate to bring that up, but
Right.
I mean from a fan's perspective, from my perspective, we go to church and then we go have dinner and then we go to the house and watch the ball game,
Right.
Through the
Right.
summer because
Yeah.
you're going to have an afternoon game, on Sundays.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we take for granted
Right.
as a viewer or a fan that y'all are working on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about just every once in a while, every Sunday through the spring, summer, and into the fall. So yeah, that's something to take into account. So
Absolutely.
so I guess it was hard to get locked into a situation then, church wise, right?
Yeah.
It was, but when we moved here to Charlotte, our son was heavily involved with the church here, and we became members there, and that's where we are right now.
Oh, is that right? So for years, you guys have been at which church is it?
Hickory Grove
Hickory
Baptist
Grove.
Church
Hickory
here.
Grove
Mhm.
Baptist. Okay.
Yeah. Which amazingly, he coached a basketball team back when the first year we were married, I think, at that, coaching his brother.
Yeah.
Back in our
So-
off,
and
in the
we're-
off season, we'd come back to Charlotte, and I was coaching the little kids basketball at that time.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of off season, did I see or read or hear somewhere something about you doing some cotton picking, working in cotton fields or something like that?
Well, there was a period of time that went by when I tried to play for 6 or 7 years in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
And it took them that long to figure out I couldn't play in the major leagues. So then I looked toward getting into the coaching and managing part of it.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity that came along when they released me the last time from the New York Yankee organization. But to get back to your question, during that time between my playing and my getting into coaching and managing, there was about a 4 or 5 year period there where I'm sitting there with a young wife and a young son. I need to do something. So we went to Central Texas and leased some farmland and farmed cotton for about 4 years.
Your family did? Or
No,
you?
just Debbie and I.
Is that right? How about that?
But back then, it was easy to get into the business because the government would help you get started.
Yeah.
Leasing the land and purchasing the equipment and stuff, and it was good. I've always thought that that's the best way to make a living is being a farmer because you're your own boss. You do the work when it needs done. And everything was good. But after a while, there were so many other things that were controlling the money we were making farming.
Yeah.
That was out of our control. I made some calls to the people I worked for in baseball to see if I could get back into it. So then I went to coaching and managing.
That's a lot to unpack right there because there you go, you're playing. And, like I told you, I played, I jokingly said, I went just as far with playing as my physical attributes would allow me to. And it wasn't quite to that level. But I remember, thinking that's a hard thing to deal with, when you get to that point where you're playing and that's all you want to do. And then you sort of have to wrap your head around the fact that, okay, well, that didn't work out. What am I going to do now? So that's a pretty long window to be out of baseball, right?
That is, but to go back when they released me out of spring training in my last year of trying to play with the Yankees.
Yeah.
I was asked if I wanted to come manage a rookie league team in Oneonta, New York.
Yeah.
Sure, that was exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, they didn't have the extended spring trainings and stuff. You would go home, and then June you would show up in Oneonta and proceed with managing the team. So that's what we did. We went home, and by the time June came, right during that period is when George Steinbrenner bought the New York Yankees.
Okay.
And everybody knows how George was. He wanted to bring his own people in there in every position throughout the organization. And so the end result was when June came, I didn't have a job doing that.
Oh, wow.
So in reality, I was probably the first manager that George ever fired, and he didn't even know it.
How about that?
So that's when we went into farming after we found out that was the case. And
man,
it's just all part of our history. We wouldn't trade it for anything.
Of course. That's interesting you say that about farming, right? Like after spending, so many decades, in baseball. And of course, I've done a lot of stuff in music that's not comparable, but I agree with you. There's something about being your own boss, getting out there, working the land. Of course, you say you're your own boss, but God's the boss, right? Because he's going to bring rain or he's not going to, so you got to deal with that. Of course, I don't know what part of Texas you're in. Rain might not have been part of the equation, but
I think when you're farming, rain is always part of the equation.
It is,
but
right?
We were fortunate that where we were farming, we had the ability to irrigate.
Yeah.
And so we went through all that process too. But during that same time, we're trying to make a new life for ourselves. Debbie started a daycare center in our house there in this little town.
Yeah.
And it's all a big bunch of sacrifices, whether you're farming or whether you're in minor league baseball or eventually the Major League Baseball. There's a lot of sacrificing to do.
So at what point you made some calls then, right? And you're like, hey, maybe I get back into ball, right? What was the next step? What was the first time when you got back into it?
Well, not very much money.
I wouldn't think so.
But the man that let me go from the Yankee organization was then working for the Baltimore Orioles.
Okay.
As the head of the minor leagues, and I reached out to him and other people, but he was the one that gave us an opportunity to get back into baseball as a rookie league manager.
Mm-hmm.
in 1980, and we were blessed to be able to stay in it for that long.
Yeah.
And end up in the major leagues for about 10 years. But still, if I had the choices, I'd go back to farming. But there were so many people dictating the prices at that time.
Yeah.
That was out of your control. You could do the hard work and the long nights and days of farming, but then at the end of the year, the amount of money you were making was during the Carter years when everybody knows how that was.
Right.
But
right.
To sum it up like this, I bought this equipment to start farming 1 year. I used this equipment solely by myself. I was the operator of the tractors and all the equipment for 4 years. And then when I decided to get back into baseball and get out of farming, I sold this equipment for more than what I paid for it new.
Oh, how about that?
And so that's just the way the economy was at
Wow.
that time. That was really the reason what drove us out.
Wow. So, Debbie, what do you think? Farming or baseball?
Well, personally, I'm going with baseball.
Okay, gotcha.
It's a little more reliable for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
baseball's more reliable. That's saying a lot right there.
Hey, and that is a pretty bad statement because really we had pretty much a 1-year contract every year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't win, if you're not doing what they want or whatever, you're gone.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a scary thing to think we lived like that, but we did and enjoyed it.
My wife, as she's listening to this, will be like, "This sounds a lot like the music business." Just bouncing around and thinking, "Well, now next year is going to be different."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So did you? So that was around 80. Was there a certain team you stayed with a little longer than another in the minors?
Yeah. I spent the first 4 years managing in the Baltimore Oriole organization up through the Charlotte O's right here where we live now.
Oh, wow.
And then we went from there to the Braves for 10 years. We spent 10 years in the minor leagues with the Braves, and then I got an opportunity in the big leagues.
Okay. So after Texas, did you guys come back here and you're in Charlotte, right? From that point on? Not really.
Well, for the most part, by then the son of ours had turned to be 12 or 13 years old.
Right.
And I came here to manage the Charlotte O's about that time. And that's about when we decided that he needs to be in one place going to school all the time.
Yeah.
So she got her a job. She's worked in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those sacrifices you have to make when you're in the music business or baseball business. But we stayed here. He went through junior high school, the University of North Carolina out here at Charlotte, married a girl from here. So he wouldn't go anywhere.
Right. Roots are planted here then.
So when we got through traveling in baseball, this is where we wanted to be, close to them.
Yeah. Well, it's a great place to be. I can promise you that, man. Charlotte's just, I love it. It's a beautiful fall afternoon today, and it's just, but you spend a lot of time on the different coasts and whatnot. So I'm sure there was a little bit of, did you stay in Charlotte, like home base right here, or were there times after your son maybe got, married and moved on? Did you move to different places, or did you?
Pretty much. He was with San Diego in 1996.
Yeah.
And I had started in the real estate business in Pinehurst, North Carolina, where I grew up.
Yeah.
And so I would just fly back and forth, or maybe go to New York or someplace where they were during that season.
Okay.
So that was pretty neat. And then I'm trying to think who came next.
In the big leagues, we were together most of the time. Outside of that first year I went to San Diego.
Yeah.
She would go. She put real estate on the back burner.
Yeah.
But you can still do it now if you decide to go back to work.
Oh yeah, there you go. I mean,
but during those 10 years that we spent around the big leagues, she would go, whether I was in Boston or L.A., Cleveland for a couple of years. she would go and got to enjoy some of that with me. But like when we were in Boston, she would pick her places she wanted to go when we would go on a road trip for 7 days, 10 days, or whatever. And she had her city she liked to go, and some she didn't.
I get it. I understand.
And it was fun. I mean, I loved L.A. We actually lived in Pasadena,
Okay.
up the 110, and probably 20 minutes from the park. And just, it was beautiful, just a gorgeous area, architecturally beautiful.
Yeah.
So it was fun when he was on the road to get out and go places and
Yeah.
do things out there. And Boston, I absolutely loved. We lived downtown. We were there
Oh,
5
wow.
years, really, because 3 years he coached for Jimmy Williams.
Mhm.
So it was
That's quite the contrast.
Yeah.
Boston, L.A., Charlotte. It's pretty interesting. Speaking of L.A., I don't, I'm a baseball fan, so I'm not trying to get all into baseball and stuff. But how about Freddie Freeman? He went on a little bit of a tear a couple weeks ago.
He did. That was great for the team, great for the city. That was sure fun to watch.
It really was. And I was happy for him. I mean, I don't know him personally, but it seems like he's just a great guy, and it's good to see really good guys to succeed like that,
Yes.
So,
Then you look down all the way down through the people that were involved in that World Series, and I read yesterday where the first base coach for the Dodgers just got the managing job for the Miami Marlins.
really,
See, when you're doing what I've done for so many years, you pay attention to stuff like that.
I get it.
So he's getting his first opportunity to manage there, and we certainly wish him the best.
Wow, that's great. Man, don't you love to see people get due, opportunities like they should? That's exciting.
Yeah, and there's only a select few of us who never actually played in the major leagues who get those opportunities to manage in the big leagues. And
Yeah.
we're fortunate.
Well, it just tells me that you know the game. I mean, they're going to take a chance, I guess, and it's saying it like that, but you got to know the game. So, you actually spent some time with the Durham Bulls, right?
Yes, I did.
That's what I thought. Again, not trying to get all into baseball.
No, we love it. That's what I know the most about.
Yeah.
But we were, like I said, we spent 10 years with the Atlanta Braves organization at
Yeah.
that time. That was their Class A team,
Yeah.
the Durham Bulls. And we started one year in Burlington, Iowa, another minor league team of the Braves. And about halfway through the season, they moved me to Durham to manage that one, where we stayed for 3 more years after we finished that year. And that was a big part of our history, too. We were there that fall. They made the movie Bull Durham. And they selected me to be a technical advisor, or whatever you want to call it, on that movie.
How-
Like I knew a lot about that. All I knew was the food truck down that they had down there was a little bit different than food trucks I was used to seeing.
Yeah.
When they're feeding Kevin Costner and Susan Sarandon
Yeah.
and Tim Robbins, those guys, they eat a little bit different.
How about? I mean, that's funny. You were there. I mean, let's just be honest. There was never a time that minor league baseball was more on the forefront than when that movie came out. I mean, everybody was paying close attention to the Durham Bulls at that point. So that's pretty cool. You were around for that. Yeah. So through all of this, we talked a little bit earlier, in there, trying to keep your eye on faith while also having your life just go bang, 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 moving all the, and I've dealt with that myself, and it's hard to keep your eye on the prize. It seems like. How did you guys deal with that? In your relationship, but also individually, as far as keeping your mind on faith, or your mind on that.
right. To me, it had a lot to do with how we were raised.
Mm-hmm.
We started out early in the church. I can remember my grandfather. We would drive 30 minutes to go to their church, and I can remember my grandmother reading the Bible to him, or his Bible lesson, because he taught his Sunday school class, and he wasn't really literate. That's back in the days where he was like 13 years old and he took off on his own.
Yeah.
So I saw how important faith was. And Grady, same thing. As parents, they went to church when he was young. So the base was there, but we know you need to be closer to God and
Yeah.
closer to godly people. And I know we both feel very blessed in that as we got into the big leagues, they were having Bible studies for the wives and chapel for the guys in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that always went on, but by the time we were up there, that was what was happening. And we both praise God for the godly people he did put in our path when we were along the way in the minor leagues, the people who kind of looked after us, and the people who were kind, and you could tell they were godly. They might not even talk about church or whatever. But and then our son, I think probably one of the most pivotal points for me is the day that he came to us, and actually it was night, came and said, "Mom, I just committed my life to Christ.
Oh, wow.
I just want to let you know." We went to this church, and they were having a group of the kids and everything. And when we came back here, you tell him how we came back when we got here, and they were going to church.
Yeah.
And we had our young grandkids, and we're like, this is our time. There's no baseball game to go to.
Yeah.
And it's just been that round circle, I guess, of God looking after you despite where you are.
Right.
And you trusting in him. Reading your Bible. You always had your Bible wherever you go.
Sure.
But
But then you get to one point when you get to be 74 years old, like me now. My most prized Christmas present from last year was a Bible with bigger print, with much larger print.
yeah.
That's great.
But our son is he's influenced us a lot.
Yeah.
It's interesting where it comes from, And what I take from what you're saying there is I really fall hard on the word roots. Mm-hmm. And first of all, how important it is for us to have had those roots planted or seeds planted when we were young, whether it was by grandparents or parents or just different people, but also how you helped instill into your son those roots. And then he in turn comes back and, sort of blesses you.
Yeah.
Again, we correlate, baseball and music and, the traveling and the lifestyle. It's a young person's game. I think we would agree with that to a certain extent. But, man, you can really, in youth, get so caught up in what life's putting in front of you, especially with those careers, because it's ever-changing and it's so much different stuff all the time, and there are different levels that you can aspire to. And it's so easy to forget about forget about God's plan and to really focus on your own plan. Thank God he's gotten us to an advanced age where we can step back and look and go,
right,
okay, glad the roots were there because they helped you get through those situations, right?
Definitely.
And I really fall back to what we talked about earlier in the fact that baseball is so littered with disappointments, and especially if you're a hitter, which I assume you were probably a position player.
I was a no-hitting catcher.
Oh, there you go. All right.
That's what I was.
Well, if no hitting catcher, then you for sure know how it feels to have to struggle with, going over for, a few games or whatever. And man, it plays a psychological and emotional and spiritual, role, and it's tough, isn't it?
I tell you, when you have a manager that tells you one time that I had the quickest bat in the league, and I look at him like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You get it out of the bat rack and make an out, and put it back in the bat rack quicker than everybody else we got." So I knew right away with that day when they released me from my playing career.
Yeah.
I was, how old was I then? 25. And he called me in there and said there wasn't going to be a place for me coming out of spring training. Okay,
Yeah.
That's fine. I replied back to him, "I don't see how you guys kept me this long." And this is the same guy that gave me a job 5 years later, starting
Yeah.
my managing career
Yeah.
with the Orioles. But I tell you, man, there's always a plan that we're working with. It's not always a plan that has good timing
Mm-hmm.
in your eyes, but the plan is there.
Well, it just goes to show you, a good catcher's hard to find. So,
And if they can't hit it, they're easy to get rid of.
yeah, I often think about, you know, how difficult sometimes that it is too to be with that locker room mentality, and it's a bunch of young guys full of testosterone, and you know, trying to focus on God in some of those settings is kind of tricky too. I mean, again, music can be that way as well, you know. But I imagine as you, especially as a manager, you definitely had to get to a point where you sort of set back from you know, a different perspective and looked at all the guys individually. So,
Well, you certainly had a lot of different viewpoints. I worked under a couple of major league managers that I took a lot from, and some I didn't take everything from. My first year to manage in the minor leagues, I was called up to spring training with the Orioles. The manager was Earl Weaver.
oh,
Everybody remembers Earl Weaver. But we had, it was just about the time that baseball chapel was becoming a bigger factor in the game of baseball because of the Sundays you're spending on the ball field and
mm-hmm.
all the scheduling that you have. Well, I walk into a game at spring training with the Orioles down in Miami, one of my early years of managing in the minor leagues. And I walk into the clubhouse at this time. It's about 10 minutes before the team's supposed to be out on the field to take infield practice before the game. And Earl Weaver's just chomping around there. He's about 4'0" tall, and he's chomping around the clubhouse. And where is everybody? We got to be out there to take infield in 5 minutes. And about this time, the door opens, and everybody was coming out of baseball chapel. Well, not everybody, but the people that were involved in it coming out of this room. And Earl still raising Cain, cussing at everybody.
Oh yeah.
And this one player comes out, Storm Davis. He was a pitcher. And Scott McGregor also was on that club. That they were telling Earl, we walk with the Lord. And this one outfielder was there with him. I just wish you'd walk with the bases loaded every once in a while. And so, some things you just can't forget.
Yeah, never forget that.
But that's just the way it was back then.
Well, there's such a mixture of personalities. And it's one thing if you're a player, right? Because you just kind of take care of you, do your thing. But all of a sudden you're a manager, and now you have to deal with all these different personalities and figure out how to manage with them, right? And that's I imagine that's a pretty tricky situation too, especially when you get a bunch of guys that are making a bunch of money too. That might change things up a little bit.
Well, they do that. They get a little bit more different, but the bottom line is they're all people, and they're individuals. I used to treat all my players like they were my own kids.
Yeah.
But now we've come along in our lives. We've gotten to be old, live in this old folk community here in Crestwind and Charlotte.
Yeah.
And now we have one of the people we look up to the most is our pastor over here at Hickory Grove Baptist Church. He's also the top man in the Southern Baptist as of last summer.
Oh, wow.
And he and I were close, not as close as I'd like to be sometimes, but I got him one time and told him that his job was very similar to the one I had in baseball for so many years. And he looked at me a little befuddled. And so I told him, I said, both of our success is going to be determined by how many times we pass the plate.
I didn't see that coming.
Ever since then, he don't know if he takes me serious or not.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting to think about the philosophy of preaching and managing. I don't know if the reason I bring this next thing up is because I'm interested in sort of, it seems like it fits your personality so well, and that's why I want to talk about it. So I saw a clip one day where Ortiz is talking to somebody, David Ortiz, and he said, yeah, Grady, I went up to bat, and I knew there was a runner on second with no outs, and I want to move him over to third. And he said, from the last organization I came from, we're just always trying to move these guys over. It didn't matter who it was up to bat. And he said, so I got a pitch on the outside corner, and I kind of reached out and swung and just kind of tapped it to second base and moved the guy over. And he said he went to the dugout, and you said, hey, come here. He said, you be you. You told him that. You be you. Don't go out there and try to move the guy over. Knock him in, move him, bring him home. And the reason I bring that up is that he seemed very interested in talking about that, and you seem very endearing to him. But it seems like that philosophy is what guys would want to play for. But it seems like that just doesn't come from baseball. That would come from life in general, right? You be you. And he said from that moment on, and he quoted, I can quote him, he said, from that point on, I went on to hit 500 home runs. I was like, okay, well, that was good words coming from a soft-spoken person, I guess you'd say. So is that a mentality you definitely took in the clubhouse or, in life in general?
Every one of these guys are different individuals.
Yeah.
And then you just try to treat them accordingly. And it's like when I ran, I only had one speed, and that was real slow.
Yeah.
So I stayed the same. I tried to stay as consistent as I could be, and I don't know.
Well, it's good advice, and it's almost like, it's godly advice really, because it's like we spend so much time trying to be I'm not saying you guys, but one can tend to spend so much time trying to be somebody they're not, just because it looks like that's what they should be from the outside, and it's like God made you the way he made you. Now be yourself and allow him to change you the way that he wants to change you. I did also have a very interesting thing that one of the first things you texted me when we were talking about doing this, and I said, we're going to talk about faith, and you said, do you mind if Debbie comes in here? And I said, because you said, and I quote, she's my number one link to the Bible, and that's daily. Is that a fact?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Is there Bible verse or verses that really stick out to you guys, or is it just something different every day?
For me, this year, each year our pastor, and we've been going there for a long time, has challenged people to read through the Bible in a year.
Yeah.
And I told Grady last year, I said, I'm going to read through the Bible this year. I'm going to attempt it, but I really want to read through it. And I would tell anybody to do that.
Right.
Especially if you're younger, because if younger people read the Bible like that, you realize everything it has to offer. There's so many stories in there, and so many. Google anger, and you'll get like 27 verses on anger.
Yeah.
Anything you want to know is in that Bible. And so it's really important to read that. And so I don't have one in particular, but I know any question I have is there.
Grady and I talked about this earlier. We both said we wish that we could rattle off chapter, verse, and then read exactly what it said. And I'm like, man, I struggle with it, especially remembering exactly what book it's from or chapter or verse. But the roots come back into play where it's like, but I remember the general idea of do unto others. That's surface level stuff, but that kind of stuff. And man, you said, and I thought this was great. You said that your son actually quoted the book of James at one point, right? Yeah. That's pretty good. I mean, that's a different level of knowledge there.
He did that in a deacons meeting over at the church, and some of my friends who were deacons also, they come and told me about that, and they were crying.
That's amazing. That he seems like quite a guy, your son.
He really is, and he reminds me so much of that grandfather of mine.
Is that right?
I'm like, where did he get this from? But I know he always grew up. He's great with people. He's great with just the kindness, the caring. I mean, you would even see wives or girlfriends or whatever that. How are the kids doing? How's your family? Or just the way he's treated. And this has been all through his career. It's not something that's fake. It's just who he is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think our son saw a lot of that too. You know,
Oh, yeah.
even without the Bible right in his face.
Yeah.
You know, he saw that these are the fruits of the Spirit
Yeah.
without knowing what they were.
Yeah, yeah, he's watching mom and dad close. I
Yeah,
imagine,
I think so. I think so.
Oh man. Well, I just thank you guys so much for coming out here and sitting with me and talking a little bit about faith and how and so now, you know, you said 74, right? So you're at a place in life where you can kind of look back and reflect and see how God's worked sometimes probably without you even knowing what was going on, right?
Right.
Yeah. I would imagine even the farming, you know, situation probably was something that would was him working something out need to be worked out.
There's so many things that's happened in our life that you don't even, like you say, you don't even realize it until you get to later on. You reflect back where he was working. He was working. Well, I got to tell you this one more story. You in a hurry?
I wish you'd tell me plenty more stories.
Well,
Go ahead.
We were in Boston. I was coaching for Jimmy Williams was managing. I was coaching, and you don't mind me telling the story, do you?
Oh,
I don't
you'll
care.
bring me to tears if you do. So maybe I should leave.
Well,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I know what he's going to say.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
You never know what I'm going to say.
You never know what he's gonna
Yeah.
say.
No, but one day she had to go get checked. We felt a lump on her breast.
Uh-huh.
But let me go back to the first. People always ask me through my career, how do you operate under the stress and pressure every day, like you're in a glass bubble and everybody knows how to do your job better than you?
Oh yeah.
I said, look, this is just a game. And I tell them about what stress is.
That day was stress.
Yeah.
That
I
day
thought you
was
were going to let me
stress.
tell the story. but we took her to the doctor. He did the examination. And, you know, they got to send these x-rays off to get checked or whatever. This was on a Friday. And we could come back in Monday and get the results. But the time from Friday to Monday,
Yeah.
that was pressure.
That's pressure.
That's pressure.
Yeah. I understand.
What we were in was just a game.
Yeah. Yeah. People forget that.
See what I have to put up with.
Oh.
I've heard when you start getting older, you get more sensitive, more emotional.
Well.
I'm just living by it.
No. Well. You can get me. You can get me too.
Okay, quit.
It's flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. I mean, God put you guys together, and you went from the individual to one. That's what the scripture tells us. So when you get emotional, it's because this is you. This is your person. So I get it. Trust me. I understand. But that's pressure.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. The other things that people want to just rattle on about, you know, and they, like you said, they think they know better than you do. It all doesn't matter at that point, does it?
Right.
Not even a little. But not to interject because it's your story, but proof is sitting in front of me that God was in the middle of
Oh,
it.
he was in the middle of
Yeah.
the whole thing. Yep, definitely. We know that.
Yeah.
I know you love me.
The story obviously took a good turn.
Oh yes, definitely.
After
yeah.
going
we
through,
knew
I'm
right.
sure.
We knew right away. Everything was good. Everything was good. But that period where you don't know, and people go through it every day.
Yeah.
In one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
There are things all our lives we go through those things like that, and that's where you definitely get on your knees.
Yeah. The stuff that we daily think matters tends to just matter so little.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. It really is.
It is.
And so I'll just be honest with you, whenever we got to talking about what we would talk about on this show, because I try to just be laid back and not have any kind of agenda. And I for sure am not trying to like dig up stories or whatever. I just want to talk about how God has moved through people's lives, And I'm so glad you bring that up, because I feel like in this day and age, people are going to want to I want to hear some kind of a story about some baseball, and I want to hear about how you handled this situation or that situation. And at the end of the day, this is proof that, man, ain't none of that stuff matters. What matters is this, right?
That's right. Amen.
And our relationship with our spouse is such a godly thing, and that's why it brings the emotion that it brings out, because it's scriptural, Yeah. He'll leave his mother and father, and the two will become one flesh. So I get it. It's no surprise that there's emotions that are involved in it. So everything's good.
Everything's good.
And when was this?
It would have been around 2001, 2002.
No.
Yeah, 99. Yes. Yeah, because you were
when
there
I
in
was
93.
in Boston coaching with Jimmy Williams.
Yeah, 98, 99.
Yeah. And then not too far after that, you got the head job there.
Yes, I went from there coaching to be Charlie Manuel's bench coach in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And one spring, the Red Sox had changed ownership that spring, and they called me to interview for the job in the middle of spring training, and I went from our spring training camp with the Indians over to talk about that, and they hired me. The 22nd of March, I took the job in Boston, and the season started like 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right in the middle of spring training. Have to deal with all that stuff, right? You were there a couple of years, and you're in LA a couple of years, right? And that's so that's when you were talking about living in Pasadena and living in, Boston to California.
What we were blessed with is being in two big market baseball cities.
Yeah.
And both groups of fans were really passionate about winning.
Yeah. Well, and you did.
Well, we had some good players.
Yeah.
In both places. It made me look good.
Yeah. Well, I think that can be said for any individual. The other ones around them can make them look pretty good. That's one thing about it. It ain't tennis or golf. It's a group effort with all that stuff. So, well, I intentionally, didn't really plan on talking too much about baseball. I really, want to kind of focus on faith, but we still ended up. Of course, it's hard to not talk about baseball when it's kind of that's your life sort of revolves around it for all of those years. But I tell you what, I could sit out here and listen to stories all day though. So
as soon as you shut down all this equipment, we'll go get something to eat and talk some more.
That's kind of what I figured. Well, I want to, like I said, I just want to focus on your faith, and it seems like God has done some really great things for you, and continues to do that. So, well, listen, guys, thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. It's been a blessing, and just getting to know you guys. It's just, as soon as I walk in, it's like coffee and sit down, and we're having a good time. So, so thank you, and we can do this again sometime if you want to. I'd love to come back and sit down with you, and you guys.
Well, we're not going to do it again with you unless you bring your wife and your family with us over here, and we'll go out on the lake or something.
Well, we love the lake, so
But all this equipment won't fit on that pontoon.
On the pontoon. Yeah, it'd fall off if it did. But it fits in an RV, so you'd be surprised what we could pull off.
Yeah.
Grady and Debi Little, thank you so much for joining us on Fully Armed. Again, it's been a blessing, and thanks again. And till we see you guys again next time, open up your Bible, put on your armor. God bless. All right, guys, that was Grady and Debi. Man, they got me a little choked up in there. What a blessing to sit down and hear their story and hear about his trials and tribulations through the years and how he dealt with them. And what a guy, man. I know a lot of folks out there in baseball world and in Red Sox Nation will remember Grady from decisions he made in Game 7 of the playoffs back in the Pedro days. None of that matters. His legacy is his love of his wife, his love in the Lord. And man, I met a couple of his grandsons, and I know I've heard him talk about his son. He's got a strong legacy, and he's a blessed man, and he is a honest and just a sweet man. And I absolutely am a better person for having sat down with him and his wife today. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Pass it along with your friends, share this, and click the buttons, and we'll see you next time on Fully Armed. God bless you.